As parents, we want our kids to come to us, not TikTok, for tough topics. That's why we at Nurtured First built body safety and consent.
Inside this course, you'll get short, real-life scripts for using body terms, practicing consent, teaching your kids a no secrets and only happy surprises rule, and helping kids notice when they have an uh-oh feeling. Everything's broken down by age, from baby, toddler, to early elementary.
Start today at nurturedfirst.com/body safety and use the code ROBOTUNICORN to save 10%. And just for full disclosure, this is our course.
Welcome to Robot Unicorn, hosted by my parents, Jess and Scott. I hope you enjoyed the episode.
So today's episode is on family values and creating family values and why they're important and some practical ways to set them up. So I think before we get started though, maybe this is the wrong way to think about it, but I've always kind of felt like, let's talk about our family values and create like a little constitution for a family. Sounds very outdated. But do you have, I know you're not going to agree with that. Yeah. See, maybe we do disagree.
No, yeah.
But in your work with families, have you found that that's something that you work on with them and that it's found to be quite important and helpful?
Absolutely. But it's not like I'm like what you're saying. It's not like I'm creating like a family crest of like
Not a crest, a constitution, like a document that outlines.
Not even that, but
here's our mission statement, our values, and like all like.
It doesn't have to be that extreme. But one thing I do talk to parents about is like discussing negotiables and non-negotiables off the bat as the parents of the house, right? Like, so what are those things that are going to be super important for you when you're
What do you mean by negotiables and non-negotiables? Like you can have a dessert after dinner type thing, or you're talking about other?
Like broader than that. Like I think you're getting into like way too minute of the details, right? It's like the broader of like, let's say a non-negotiable is in our house, we're not going to talk about being overweight, being fat, needing to lose weight, like that type of thing, right? We've agreed on that before our kids even get to that age where that's a thing. And we are going to protect our children from that kind of language. That's a non-negotiable in our house. And we agree that both of us are not going to do that.
You're saying as parents?
As parents. Yeah. The kids are not involved in this discussion. Or before the children are toddlers, a non-negotiable for us is we're not spanking our kids. Like we both agree that that's just not going to be a path that we go down. And I think it's really important for parents, especially if they can have those conversations before their kids are of the toddler age, of the like elementary school age, even screens. Like it's, non-negotiable for us. Screens are not going to be in the bedroom, right? So it's not about like the little details, but it's like, what are these core things that as parents, we want to be on the same page about so that when that opportunity comes up, we already know what our decision's going to be. Like,
isn't that kind of challenging to actually think about though, if you're to that point where your kids are doing the thing like screens? Yeah, okay, that's maybe an obvious one, but I feel like there are a lot of other little ones that you don't really think about until you're all of a sudden dealing with it.
But I think if you can, so a lot of parents don't do this, but a lot of parents that have actually consumed Nurtured First content for a long time, like this is something I teach in the Parenting Little Kids course. It's something that I've taught for a long time. So a lot of them have done that, but then you're already in the practice of having those conversations together. And so that when a big thing comes up, like your 10-year-old's like, hey, I want a phone. It's like, this isn't something that we're talking about with the 10-year-old. This is a decision that the parents are making. And you're going to go back to like, okay, what's negotiable here? What's non-negotiable? What do we believe as the parents in this situation? So I think it's just a good practice of starting to think about those bigger decisions as parents. And then the negotiables are things that maybe are a little more fluid, or for example, non-negotiables, no screens in the bedroom. A negotiable might be like, yeah, you can play some Nintendo Switch, for example, and how much you play might vary day to day, kind of depending on what we're doing, how much outdoor time you've had, blah, 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 blah. Like that's more negotiable. But I do think that having actual conversations about that is important, because sometimes that's where parents come up against like, oh, to me, that's non-negotiable. To you, that's negotiable. Okay, now we have to talk about this because this is going to become an issue if we're not on the same page about this. And often that's punishment, I think, in a lot of the parents that I work with.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, is that just, again, a subset of the population that you're seeing because they're coming to a therapy practice?
I mean, I hear about it constantly on Nurtured First too. That's probably like the biggest thing I hear about is we're not on the same page, right?
About punishments or discipline.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to think back to when, I mean, the main story that we talk about often is us driving, and we were actually driving past my childhood home and everything, and then I was asking you questions about tantrums and all that with our oldest daughter, and just kind of questioning you and pushing, again, like some people don't like. I was pushing you on what you were saying about not punishing and all that. But I feel like after that conversation, we kind of got on the same page. So I can see that. But it's not like we were creating a set of family values. So do you think there's possibly like a ritual that needs to be put in place to, like, say, review? I don't know, it just sounds very business-like and
I kind of love it. Like, I think because, okay, so for us, I'm a therapist. Even before you were working with me, like, I'm constantly thinking about this, constantly thinking about child behavior, right? I remember being like 18 years old and making a pact with myself of like, I'm never spanking my kids, like, period. That's not happening. This is something I've thought about for a really long time. But most families, you're busy, you're working, you're raising kids, there's a lot going on, and you're not having those set times to come together and be like, what is our response going to be when it comes to tantrums? What are we going to say when our child says, can I have a phone? Right? And so then when you don't proactively kind of have those conversations thinking about what might come up in your child's life, then when the situation happens, you don't really have a plan and you're just going to do whatever feels right to you in that moment. So I actually do think I love the idea of a family meeting. Like, just like you might review your finances, you might review other things together. Like, can you talk about discipline? Can you talk about your values? It doesn't have to be like this whole big thing, but I actually think for a lot of parents, intentionally building that in is essential to actually having the conversation.
So, I mean, for us, I don't think we've ever intentionally built in time to talk about those things.
Right. But I think it's different because we talk about it all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we do it for work, and then we're inevitably talking about things with the kids too.
So I think it's hard to relate that to our scenario. Like, we're literally on this podcast talking about it every week. We're talking about it with work. Like, it's it just
to be fair, also, it's not like we're writing them down necessarily. Yeah. I mean, you kind of are in your posts, maybe, I guess, a little bit, but it's not like I'm very on social media very little. So then
it's written on my heart.
Okay, yuck.
No, but I agree. And I don't even think it's for parents that they have to write it down or like make a list or make like a document. It's more like just being intentional about the conversations. And I do find that when parents, let's say they're having a conversation, they're like, okay, a non-negotiable for me is spanking. And they both agree. They're maybe both unsure about timeouts or other punishments, but they're like, spanking we can agree on. Then when you're in the moment and your child's having a tantrum, you've already agreed spanking's not enough. Whereas I find a lot of the people I work with or hear from later, it's like they never had those conversations. They don't know. So their toddler's having a tantrum for the very first time. And then one of them just spanks the toddler without ever having thought that was something they were going to do or not do. And then the conversation comes up. So it doesn't have to be a whole thing, a whole like business document. It's just more the intention behind the conversations.
So, I mean, up to this point, you've been talking about just between parents, but at a certain point, I feel like you have to involve the kids a little bit. Like, I would say our oldest two are probably our oldest is definitely at the point where she can be involved in that discussion. And same with our middle, our youngest daughter, she still maybe doesn't understand necessarily the entire conversation, but she's been involved. So there's things like discipline where parents talk, but I feel like you wouldn't be involving your kids in that, would you?
No. Discipline. So I actually was just writing a post about this because I love this topic of like, there are adult conversations and decisions, and then there's family conversations and decisions. So adult conversations and decisions are things like discipline, finances, like when they're really young, right? Things like what we're eating for dinner. Like, I think that should be an adult decision that maybe you let your kids have some input in, but like you make the final decision around. But then I think you can talk about broader family values as a family. So actually I had something that we did this summer. I don't know if you remember. I think I did this with the girls where I like read them a story about someone who is being very welcoming.
Yep.
And then I said, okay, so for the month of September, I think it was, or even like maybe for the fall, let's have our word be welcoming and how we can be welcoming to people, outside.
Wasn't it in August already? Because we were going to a friend's cottage, I think, just after that.
I know it was for sure before school started. Yeah, maybe in like August. So then we were constantly talking about how were we welcoming today? What did welcoming look like? And
what does that mean?
What does it mean? And so that was a word that is part of who we are as a family, who we want to be. But it was more like an intention, like, let's talk about this for a couple months and like just model and explain and show this family value of welcoming, right? And then we might do it again and it's a different word. But I think that was one really nice way for us to teach our kids something that we want to instill in them, but have them in on the conversation and then do check-ins like every night at dinner kind of thing of like, how were you welcoming today? How did someone welcome you? You know, and like trying to notice it.
I'm going to assume, just for the sake of our conversation here, that it's important to include children in the discussion. Mm-hmm. Why would it be important for them to be included in the discussion on these family matters, these family values?
A few reasons. So first, I like to include kids in the conversations about family values because sometimes kids have something to say about a way that they're not feeling valued themselves or a value that they want that actually reflects something that they need. So I think about some kids I've worked with who, let's say, their siblings haven't been very kind to them. And so then sometimes a family value that they might put into the discussion, if you're sitting with your kids and being like, hey, let's talk about things that matter to our family. I wouldn't even say value. I'd say, let's talk about things that matter to us in our family. And someone might say, it matters to me that my brother speaks to me nicely. And then as a parent, you're like, oh, so true, because I know that the brother's been teasing him all the time or whatever, right? So now everyone has a say and you're like, okay, as a family, we are going to work to speak to each other in a kind way, even if we disagree. We can state what we feel, but we're not going to be like teasing or rude or make comments that are hurtful. And then it becomes the whole family working together to make that change. So I think that's a really good reason to have your child in on the discussion because there might be things that you're not even noticing that are coming up for them or bothering them. And then the other thing is you're modeling it as a family, right? So it's not just you saying, we're going to be welcoming and like, you have to be okay with it.
Yeah, right.
Right? So it's like, okay, we all together are going to be welcoming. And then it gives you some accountability too as the parent to be like, how am I going to model this to my kid? Like if this is a value, then I also have to live it out. And so I like that. Then you're all working as a family towards a common goal, which can lead to bonding and more family closeness as well.
Yeah. Well, and I have done a bit of research for this episode and learned something about the self-determination theory, which is important for child's development psychologically. Mm-hmm. And what I learned was that the three main pillars of self-determination theory is autonomy, competence, and relatedness. And so through the values that you create as a family, including them in that helps them feel that autonomy that they need to continue developing and feel like they're their own person. Because as they get older, they're going to be questioning that more and more. And then sort of through the process, you're helping them build their competence by kind of scaffolding and helping them make decisions based on, let's say, the family values that they helped create so that they learn skills. And then there's like that relatedness piece where that is sort of that welcoming. Like for us, we added welcoming as one of our values or words. You love words, but then that helps them kind of learn how to relate with others. And even just the process of us getting together to talk about these things helps them just bond and relate with each other, all of us as a family. So I found that interesting. Like there's actually a name for that where they're starting to self-determine. They're kind of becoming their own little person and trying to make decisions on their own. And these are how we can help them by helping them gain some autonomy, build competence, and feel that relatedness with others.
Yeah, I think to bring it back, I love the relatedness piece, but to bring it back for parents, I think that we can just imagine, because you were saying like, should you do regular meetings? What does that look like, right? But I'm picturing like what we did with our daughters, right? So we read them a story, we sat down together, read a story, we said, okay, after reading this story, I think a word that matters to us as a family is being welcoming. Would you guys agree? Like just to kind of walk a parent through it. And the kids were like, okay, well, what does it really mean? So then we talked about times like we felt welcomed or that we've welcomed other people and what does that feel like? And why does that matter to our family? We've had those discussions. And then it was like, okay, so as a family, let's make this our goal to be welcoming to others and to notice when we feel welcomed, what that feels like. And let's do that for the next couple months and we'll check in on it regularly, right? Well, and then that becomes part of your family meal time. So at meals, you're like, hey, what was one way you welcomed someone today? And that relatedness piece that you're saying, now we're working on something, same team as a family, which is like really beautiful for connecting to each other. And we're also taking time to notice when our child lives out that value to say, hey, I noticed you were really welcoming, even to your own sibling today, which like boosts their behavior because now we're noticing the behavior we want to see more of. And it also helps them in that autonomy piece. What you're saying is like, Whereas before, maybe you feel like you kind of have to prompt them, let's say welcoming.
Yeah, okay. Tell them to do that thing.
Come on, elbow them or whatever, like say hi. You know?
Yep.
So now they have that on their mind, so they're learning how to do that on their own. And then when you were saying scaffolding, basically what that means is like at first you're really coaching them on how to be welcoming, let's say. And then slowly as they get more comfortable and they've done it more times and now they know what it looks like, you pull yourself back and they can now do this on their own. And so that's why I personally like, instead of just choosing like, here's 50 words that define our family, like maybe in a year you go through like 3 or 4 different values that you have as a family and just focus on one at a time. Instead of, I know a lot of families will have these meetings and they'll choose like, okay, here's like 50 things that we want to describe our family. And the kids are like, okay, cool, but I don't know what any of them even mean. So
what is that? Do people actually do that?
Yeah. Like, I mean, there's lots of family value workbooks, things like that you can buy where you're like circling words that like describe your values.
Oh.
I've seen a lot of that. But my problem with that is even if we did that with our kids, even our 8-year-old, I think would be like, what do half of these mean? Like, I don't even know what this is. Whereas like, if you're just intentional about once every few months sitting down and be like, what's something that we want to work on together as a family that matters to us? I think you'll see a lot more growth and closeness in your family that way.
Yeah. And let's say during times of stress, which is just inevitable as
when are you not stressed when you're a parent?
Well, not necessarily all the time, but if you're in a season of stress, working together on something, having these conversations, I think can be kind of that common ground that you have and a way of connecting that is kind of like an oasis in a desert. I don't know if that's the right way to describe it, but it's kind of like you're consistent. So it can be the place, let's say a meal that you have where you're talking about these things is the place where your values kind of live, even though you are, say, overall stressed as a family or as adults.
It gives you like I love that oasis or like the consistency, the ritual of it all. It's the structure that kids crave, right? So there's something consistent amidst all the stress going on in your life. For sure. I really love that.
I feel like the way you've been describing the family values, though, is like you choose one at a time or something, which I think makes sense for kids our own children's age.
Yeah.
But does that make sense? Let's say our kids are now, our youngest is 13, right? And our oldest is 19. I feel like you can then select like, hey, as a family, we're going to have this discussion. Maybe there'll be some eye rolls from them because they're teenagers, but having those discussions and then choosing a larger set, not necessarily 50, but let's say you choose 5 and say like, as a family, this is what we're trying to achieve together. And we come up with those together. Does that not make more sense than just selecting one at a time?
So I think I need to like back it way up here. Yeah,
because I feel like up to this point, I feel like it is very haphazard the way you're describing coming up with family values and like how they're used and even like your values as a parent for discipline or spanking or whatever versus like a value of welcoming that feels very different.
Okay, so let's back it way up. First off, I think we should just talk about like what is a family value.
Yep.
Right? So I'm curious, how would you define a family value?
Not necessarily just a word, but it's a way that we as a family agree we should act with each other or the way we should live out life. Mm-hmm. That's kind of how I describe. So like, let's say for us, I feel like one of them is, welcoming. But then we could also talk about how hard work is another one of our values that would say that we have. And we want to make sure that our children also understand that too over time, which will look different as they get older. But it's kind of like the way we act and do things throughout life and interact with others and interact with each other.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was thinking too. But I think obviously I love a definition. I think it's important to start with that. Of like, I see a value as like the way I interact with the world, the way that I treat others, the way that our family kind of acts and exists in the world and what matters to us. So then I think the very first way that we teach family values has to be through modeling it, right? So you're talking about the teen years. I think it could be nice to sit down with your teenagers and say, these are our family values, respect, hard work, whatever. But if we haven't been modeling that and they're 16 and we're like, this is our family value, like, they're going to be like, okay, Dad, who cares? So the most important thing, as always, is that our children are watching us to be the model of these values, right? And that's why I think the very first part is, as parents, having that conversation, if you can, about like what matters to us, right? And that's why I was starting with the parents at the beginning of the episode too, because the way that we act, like you and I, is going to be the biggest indicator of if our children take on our family values or not, right? Because we could label words all day, but if we're
Yeah,
not.
it's sort of meaninless in
It's
the end.
meaningless,
Unless
like-
you're actually doing it.
And I've heard that from parents where they're like, I told my kid that we value kindness. But then when we unpack it a little bit, it's like, well, they're yelling at their kid all the time. So it's hard for their child to
they're
like.
yelling at their kid for being mean to their sibling or something like that.
Exactly, right? So like, how can we take on that family value of kindness if we're not being kind to our kid, right? So like, we are the ultimate model. How are our kids going to be welcoming if they see us talk badly about people, be dismissive of strangers, all those kind of things? They're not going to be welcoming. So I think it has to start there, first and foremost, in ourselves. And so asking ourselves the hard questions of like, what do we value? And then what do we want to pass down to our kids? And so we've had those conversations, right? Of like, and maybe it's not a formal sit down between the two of us, but on a car ride, or obviously here, it's like, okay, we do value hard work for our kids. Right?
Yeah, I would say we have it pretty easy in that this is just a part of the work that we do. So we're already talking about this, but I'm just thinking for people who don't have that.
Yeah. So maybe this, like listening to this episode will be a prompt for you to be like, oh, let's talk about that. Like, what does matter to us? And so for us, like a few things that we do try and model to our kids is being welcoming, being kind, being respectful in the way we talk, in the way we even like say thank you to someone. Like I always try, and even if, let's say I'm picking up a coffee, I really try and model to the kids, like looking at the person serving me coffee, saying thank you, being kind to them, even if I'm in a rush and it's taking a long time, right? We try to model being accountable to our mistakes. If someone in the family makes a mistake, it's like, let's just say it. Let's just talk it out.
Yep. Don't hide it.
Don't hide it. Like, let's just work that out together. So those are the things that we know and we're trying to model and discuss with them. So then I think only from there can you have the conversations when they're little about what I was saying, like the one word, because we're already modeling all the words to them, all the things that we want. But now we're more specifically being like, let's talk about welcoming for a few months. But all the other things, it's not like they're put on the back burner. We're still modeling that to them, right? And then as they get older and they become teenagers, you can have more thorough discussions about the why behind it. So like, this is why we value hard work. This is why we value being accountable for your mistakes and talking about them. This is why we value honesty. And you can have those broader discussions of something that you've already modeled to your kids for many years. And it's more likely that they're going to act that way because that's how they've seen you act. And then if they act in a way that's not in the family value, right? Like they're not honest or trust, like they're lying to you, they can be like, like, help me understand why you lied to me. It doesn't make sense. Our family always has valued honesty, but now I'm finding out that you're not telling me something that's true. So like, let's try and understand what's happening here. So then you can bring it back to the values. But yeah, so I think we have to kind of look at the broader picture, and then the conversations are just like one piece, but it has to come from us down to them.
I think that makes sense. I appreciate going back to the start there, because I think that's important for people listening to hear. It's a whole process over the lifespan, your lifespan, really.
Yeah, I think this is like a common classic parenting issue where it's like, let's have a conversation about our family values and pick a word. But you have to like look at the whole environment. Yeah. Right? Yeah,
it really should be, say, the parent or parents or caregiver that is thinking about these things first and kind of presenting it to their kids.
Yeah. So I even think about like my own upbringing. My parents had a lot of values and things like, let's say, honesty, but it wasn't like we sat down and we're like, let's talk about honesty for a month. Like we totally could have, and that would have been great. But I more so understood that and became honest myself because I just saw it modeled to me.
Right.
And I felt safe to be honest. So then that's more important than any kind of conversation that you can have, right? That is an extra that's like really nice to have, but it has to start from modeling it first.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, that's everything you already talk about, right? Is making sure you model all the things that you want your child to do, because you're kind of their developed brain externally for them.
We're setting the blueprint. Hey friends, so at pickup last week, our daughter asked Scott a truly kind of tricky question in front of her younger siblings. Scott was telling me that when he heard a question like this, he used to panic, but this time he had a plan. And he said to our daughter, "Thank you for asking. Let's talk tonight when we've got privacy." And that's a line that he learned straight from our new body safety and consent course at Nurtured First. So this new body safety and consent course is taught by me. So Jess, if you listen to this podcast, you know me. I'm a child therapist and a mom of 3, and I have taught body safety and consent education for years. This course takes all my years of experience teaching this education and gives you calm, age-appropriate language for body parts, consent, and boundaries. You'll learn how to teach your kids that no means no. You'll learn how to teach them to read facial cues. You'll talk about safe and unsafe touch, and you'll even teach them about their uh-oh feeling. There's guidance inside this course for the real life stuff, like tickling that goes too far, and even the difference between a secret and a surprise. We made this course at Nurture First because research shows that body safety education helps kids speak up sooner, and we want that for our family, for Scott and I, but also for you. So check the course out at nurturedfirst.com/bodysafety, and to save 10%, use the code ROBOTUNICORN. And just full disclosure here, we are the creators of this course, and we're so proud of it.
So we've already kind of talked about this, but do you see that parents will often over-focus on the rules of their values and then miss the relationship part of that a bit? So they think it's more about, hey, we're creating a set of rules for a family to follow rather than building that relationship and trying to kind of approach life in a similar way. I mean, different for each person in the family, but still, as a family unit, we're kind of unified in the way we think about things.
Yes, I think it's very easy. Like the honesty example would be a good one, right? Where if like your child lies and be like, we value being honest, so go to your room because you didn't listen to me or because you weren't honest with me. It kind of goes against what you're trying to do, which is create a family environment where they feel safe to be honest with you.
Yeah, I
right?
know, but let's think about our household, and we create a safe environment, but still sometimes, I mean, our toddler for sure, but then our preschooler, but then also our kindergartner will lie to us and then kind of hide. And she'll feel terrible about it, even though we've said, like, just bring it to us. It's okay. We're not going to be upset if you tell us something that you did. Like she broke just a piece of cork that we use as a pot holder. So for putting pots on the table.
Totally didn't matter. Yeah.
Yeah, it really didn't matter. But she actually hid it under a chair, and only did we find it after I moved a chair to just rearrange the room a little bit. And then she started crying. We're like, we told you it's okay. You just tell us it's fine. We'll come up with a resolution together. But so I think you can still create that environment, but then you still have your child lying to you regardless, even though your rule is, hey, we're honest with each other. So
I think that like something I've been trying to really understand about that, like just in our own life, because yes, like in theory, like we've totally created the environment where it's like, you should be able to tell us anything. Like we've never got mad at you for telling us the truth. Right. But I think that there's a difference between saying to a child, I'm not going to get mad at you for the truth, and catching them in a lie and then showing them, hey, you're not in trouble. Like I wouldn't have been mad at you for telling me this, like, and actually coaching them through it in that moment. Because I think then we're showing them that we could have handled the honesty that didn't happen. But I think often what happens is like, we tell them, you can tell us anything, like come to us with the truth. And then they don't, and then they lie. And then we catch them in that lie. And then we have like, why weren't you honest? Like, you know, we could easily get mad at them. Like, why weren't you honest with me? Like, you should have told me. And now they're in trouble for lying. When in reality, maybe we needed to show them in that moment something like, hey, I could have handled it, actually. And I think you said that to our daughter. Like, I actually would have been fine if you told me about this. Like, I just want you to know that. It wouldn't have been a big deal. Yeah. Like, it's totally fine. I could have handled the truth. Like, next time, like, just be honest with me. It's not a big deal. If you broke this thing, like totally you could have told me. And so focusing on like showing them that it would have been okay to live out that value and they didn't need to hide or feel shameful about it, I think is more effective than getting angry at them because they didn't live out to the value. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think it does. I just think inevitably, for whatever reason, it's built into maybe humans in general, but like we see it so explicitly in our young kids that they'll lie and feel absolutely terrible about it, even though we've set up this environment where like, we're not going to be upset. Just tell us, we'll be soft about it and everything. But there's still that shame that causes them to not live out the values anyway.
Yeah. And it's so fascinating because it's all rooted in the same thing where it's like, they don't want to be in a bad relationship with us. Yeah. They don't want that rupture to happen, but their brains are so mature and like in their own little rationale, it's like, well, immature, sorry. Like in their own rationale, it's like, well, if I hide this, then the rupture won't happen. But then they just live with that shame anyway. Right. Yeah. Whereas what we want to teach them is in that moment, you could have come to me, you wouldn't have been in trouble. like, and having that conversation about why they felt so shameful versus like catching them in not living out the value.
I don't know that I've thought of it quite that way. It's a much deeper maybe way of thinking about it. Like I was just thinking now about the fact that I saw over this stupid little cork pot holder, how much shame she had over this thing that costs us nothing. Right? Like it might have even come from a thrift store or something like that, for all I know. But thinking about it in terms of she's seeing that as like a potential separation of the relationship she has with her favorite people, us. That could give me even more compassion than I might already have, because I can see how, okay, this is just wired into humans that if we lie, it ends up creating this separation. So even over little things, as a kid, I don't understand the difference between a little and big thing. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I can feel a little bit more empathy towards what she was feeling then in that situation.
Yeah, and in my opinion, in that situation, when a child's lying, it's like they're actually needing you to show them that you could have handled the truth versus having a whole conversation on honesty and why are you lying and that. Like, and that when that situation happened in my head, I'm like, I know why you're lying. It's because you didn't want us to get mad at you. You don't want that rupture. So what you need to know is that that rupture would never have happened.
Yeah, your brain goes there, but I don't think anyone else
Exactly. That's why I wanted to talk about that one, right?
Yeah.
Because I think most other people just get caught up on like, that's not our value. We're honest with, and then it gets in, we have the wrong conversation with our child that actually could lead to more.
Kind of having like a blame game with them then after that. Yeah, okay. That is not a change in my opinion, but a perspective change a little bit.
I would have thought you would have thought that exact same way. So that's interesting. So
here's the difference, right? This was a 50-cent cork pot holder. But what if it was like, I don't know, our computer or iPad and the same thing happened? Am I going to feel the same compassion in that moment? If it was hidden and I can't find it and all of a sudden I'm finding that the screen was cracked or something, like, I don't know, like a situation where it's a little more substantial, right?
Here's how I think of it.
I don't know that I would feel that same...
Not in the moment, maybe. But the same thing probably would be happening if that was hidden and they didn't come to you with the truth.
No, I know, exactly. On her side, I think,
it's the
honestly, it would be the
same
same situation. It wouldn't matter if it was a computer or this 50-cent little thing or toy. It feels probably the same to her, but maybe I reacted differently in that situation because it was a cheap,
didn't care
meaningless
about
thing.
the thing.
Yeah, I didn't care about it.
I think making spaces where... Like, I think the way you responded in that moment to say, like, hey, you could have told us, you wouldn't have been in trouble, makes it maybe more likely that the next time she can just tell you, right? I think we have to show kids that they can be honest with us so many times before they actually feel fully comfortable being honest with us. And that's like the work we have to do as parents, is to like notice our own triggers and be like, how am I responding in this situation based on like how I actually want our family values to be lived out?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that goes back to what you've been teaching for years, right? We want to be the trusted caregiver, the people, the secure base, I think you call it, where they can come back to anytime and they trust you're going to be relatively consistent, as much as a human can, consistent in the way you interact with them and respond to these kinds of situations.
You know, I think about my own parents in this situation, and honesty was such a huge thing in our home of like, you can be honest with us. And I think I was very much like our sensitive daughter, where it's like, I would just always be worried that someone's going to be mad at me. But they like did show over and over that like, no, we can handle it. Like, you just tell us. And like, I remember so many mistakes, even as a teenager, that I would make, and I would end up telling them and they would handle it quite well. And then when bigger things happened that we had to be honest about, like really hard, like real life stuff, like when we were newly married, whatever, like hard stuff, my first instinct as like even their adult child was like, I want to tell them because I know that they can handle it and tolerate the real thing that I'm feeling right now. Yeah. So I think for me with our daughter, like I'm more on the side of like curiosity. Let's say when honesty doesn't happen, that's such a huge value for our family. It's like, okay, well, what else can I do? How can I show you that I can tolerate your truth so that eventually you want to have that same relationship where you can be open and honest about the big things, not just like the little cardboard broken thing, right?
Yeah.
So I think like...
Well, and we are definitely seeing more honesty from her.
Even than a few months ago.
Yeah. Like let's say a year ago, to be honest, we had no idea if what she was telling us about her time at school
she also
was
had a
just,
very creative brain. Yeah.
If it was just her imagination or if it was real or not. We would end up texting the teacher and like ask, did this happen at school today? And she'd be like, no.
This happened last night actually with our youngest. She told me that at school during cot time, everyone was throwing toys at her. I was like, they were? Yep. everybody throwing toys at me. I was like, that's interesting. I said, if I asked your teacher, do you think that would be true? Don't ask her. I was like, oh, why not? Like, if everyone's throwing a toy at you during cot time, that would be quite like concerning. Oh, yeah, don't ask her. I said, why? Did it not happen? No, it didn't happen. And I was like, okay. But then like that opens up a discussion of like imagination versus honesty, right? Like for that was just imagination.
Which we've talked about in another episode.
Yeah, we did a whole episode on
lying
where we talked about that. Yeah.
How that's actually a part of development too. So maybe we're talking about honesty because little kids, they're developing the ability to hold like the truth in mind and another story in mind at the same time. And sometimes they have a hard time differentiating between what's real and what's not.
But then to go back to your family values, it's like, okay, so our value is honesty. So then in that moment, I just said to her like, oh, okay, so was that imagination, you think a little bit, that like you were just imagining? Yeah, kind of pretend. I'm like, okay, so that's fine. But like when we're pretending, maybe you could just say like pretending versus like telling me that that's actually what happened. Oh, okay. And then that was fine, that we moved on. But like a response that wouldn't have been helpful is like, why would you lie to me about that? You know, why would you tell me that? And now I'm worried and you're like lying, you know?
I mean, it's one thing though for preschooler who, maybe parents get mad at their kids for that.
They do, yeah.
But I feel like she's so young that you just kind of can't believe half of the stuff she says anyway, because she's making up little stories or scenes or different things with her toys, and then all of a sudden she's saying something that you just heard her playing with her Barbies and creating this little scene. So
they live like half in imagination, half in real world.
But I feel like with her middle daughter, who's now in senior kindergarten, if she were to do the same thing, and she still sometimes does, it can be a little bit more aggravating because she can have full conversations with you. She sounds like an older kid now, but she's still not quite telling you the truth.
Yeah, exactly. So
I mean, we're only talking about this one value because honesty is probably our biggest value.
And I think it would be for many, many families.
So all of this is coming from that little broken cork pot holder thing.
Yeah.
I've been trying to figure out if I would react in that same way no matter what was broken. And I don't know that I would.
Yeah.
So then I can kind of see why she would be worried, because in her mind,
it's all big.
She doesn't understand the concept of money or what it takes to buy a computer versus this piece of cork. So I can see for her, they're all big deals.
Every deal is a big deal. Yeah.
But yeah, how do you remember that in the moment?
Right.
Especially if you're stressed too. Which I was looking into like information on something called the family stress model. And I would say we are probably in the best family situation you possibly could be in, where we don't have to worry about paying the rent or anything. We don't have to worry about making sure we have enough money to put food on the table. We're doing okay that way. But that adds a whole extra layer that like I could relate to as a kid, but it almost feels like that's a separate life from now. So it's hard for me to even relate to that anymore. But that adds a whole other layer of complexity, and then makes it even more difficult in those moments to live out your own values and then show your kids that these are the right values, because that also leads to increases in for parents, depression, anxiety, and all that.
For sure.
So how, if you were working with someone in that situation where, let's say, they barely have enough money to pay for their rent and their food, and maybe, let's say here, like coats and snow pants and all that, they have to replace every single year because their kids are growing. How does a parent in that kind of situation actually figure out, these are my parenting values, or these are our family values, and this is how we're going to live it out as a family, when potentially a lot of things in their life are very chaotic?
I mean, I think that no matter what situation you're in, you can still have these things. And, maybe you take the pressure off yourself by being like, like I was saying before, like a nice to have is you sit down and you're like, I have a word for 3 months. That's a nice to have when you're not super stressed out and you have the capacity to do something like that. But even if you are in extreme stress, you can be like, okay, a value for me is like showing my kids I love them, and maybe that doesn't always look perfect because in this season I'm like super stressed out. I'm losing my cool more than I usually would. So what I'm going to try and do is like just show up for them the best I can and show them I love them by repairing, right? So if a situation happens where, let's say, they break something and it is important, you know, it's something that matters to you and you do lose your cool and you're like, oh, shoot, like I wanted them to be honest and now I've lost my cool with them. And you're like, okay, but my value is repairing. Like that's the one thing I know I can do. So even if I've lost my cool, I can go back to them and be like, look, that is not how I wanted to respond to you in this situation. I mean, every parent, no matter how much stress you're going through, I was literally just telling you this morning I had to do that because I lost my cool last night at 3 a.m., right? So like every parent can have a value of repair. Like we come back and we...
Well, I kind of see that as being a part of our honesty because that's the way you're feeling, right? You're feeling guilt for that. So you should explain that to your child and why.
Yeah, come back and repair. And so I think like, let's say you're in that stress, like just paring it down to be like, I don't have to work on every single value right now that I want to, like maybe someday when I'm not in this like crazy chaotic season of life, but I can have the value of, I want to show them I love them and I'm going to repair after I lose my cool or whatever, and focus on the things that matter most. And then when you have the capacity, if you have the capacity, you can focus on the other things.
Yeah, because I know that, let's say for myself, if I've been stressed, I end up getting pretty grumpy. You probably haven't noticed that.
Or tired.
Yeah, or tired. Yeah, I need my sleep. And because when I'm stressed, I don't sleep then anymore either. And then I'll go.
Your sleep is your first thing that goes out the window.
Yeah, I get very grumpy. I do try to not be so grumpy and show my love to the girls and to you. It's a lot more challenging for whatever reason during that time. But then I will often try and repair when I'm not feeling as stressed anymore. Like when I'm feeling, okay, I feel a little bit better today. I'm going to talk to the girls and...
Yeah, and even like for parents who are just in a constant state of stress, because you might be stressed one night and then the next morning you're better, right?
I was going to say...
That's a little different.
These studies that were done on the family stress model are on basically low socioeconomic status families. And just showing if they are not, let's say, taught healthier ways to communicate with each other, even when stressed, it causes more negative outcomes. But if they learn how to interact and communicate with each other, and it ends up with much more positive outcomes for the whole family.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And so...
But I just know for myself, like as a child, I was in a constant state of stress, alarm, all day, every day, 24/7 for many years.
For all your formative years.
In a row.
Yeah.
Right. So then I know now too that I don't know if my brain is just wired a little bit differently in that way, where my cortisol levels jump a little more quickly than other people. So I try and keep an eye on that for myself because I know I just get grumpy when I'm stressed.
Well, and I think to bring it back to values, you have to keep an eye on your stress. You have to do the work of doing the things that make you not stressed and make you show up as the best dad you can be so that you can live in your values, right? And I think that's the case for a lot of parents too, of like, we can't just tell our children like, these are our family, like back to what I was saying before, our family values treating each other with kindness and I'm yelling at you all the time, right? Like, so a lot of it is the guilt we feel as parents or the shame that we feel as parents often comes from us not acting in a way that is aligned with the values we want to have.
Yeah.
And so something you've done a lot of as someone who was a former child who lived in a state of alarm for many, many years is you've done a really good job of taking the steps you need to take so that you can show up in a way that aligns with the values that you have. And sure, some days you're stressed and then whatever, you have a hard day and the next morning you repair, but you're pretty quick at repairing. It's not like it's like months later or something like that, right? Yeah. But I think for parents, like that is the work that we have to do as parents too. We can't just tell our children these are our values and expect that they're going to be honest, and like they have to see it from us. We have to be able to do. And I think even if you have this all family stress and it does make it harder, I mean, there's a lot of families that grew up, let's say if you're talking about low socioeconomic status and jobs and stuff, but they will say, but I was so loved and I felt that from my parents, right? And so it's not that it's not possible to give that. Whereas you can have a family who's like extremely wealthy and grows up with everything physically that they need, but they didn't feel loved. And they struggle a lot with that later in life, right? So like that is a constant that we can give our kids kind of no matter what.
Yeah. Okay. I think this is a good place to wrap it up. And as we do so, what do you think is the biggest roadblock you see parents encounter when they start this process of intentionally creating family values, and then a piece of advice or one way that they can get started? So let's say if you have someone coming into your therapy practice to talk to you about this.
Mm-hmm. And we do talk about values a lot. And I think one of the biggest roadblocks is not being on the same page.
Okay.
Because let's say, to like bring it back to like, it has to start with us as parents, right? So first internally, just as individuals, and then as parents. But let's say one partner I'm working with has like an internal value of like, back to the discipline, let's say, like, I don't want to punish my kids. And the other one has this value of like, I do want to punish them because that's how I grew up and I turned out fine. And this is what I want to do. And so they're trying to create even like a most basic, like negotiable, non-negotiable list for their parenting. And they can't agree on like that one thing. Mm-hmm. I think that is the biggest struggle parents face. And a lot of parents have that who listen to the podcast here. So then it's a real curiosity that has to happen for each other about like, why do you hold that so close for both? And I think there has to be an openness, which this is where therapy is often like, people come to therapy because that's the only place that they can have these discussions without getting really mad at each other. Yeah,
because I was just going to say that sounds a lot easier said than done.
Well, yeah, that
works for us.
That's why a lot of people end up in therapy. Sometimes therapy is a really good option if you just can't agree on core values that you have as parents. Because if there's certain things like, let's say, spanking or even yelling sometimes, like I'll have parents who grew up in a very yelly family, like one person didn't, like I was yelled at all the time. It's just how my family communicates, not a big deal. Like we can yell at our kids. And the other person's like, my whole nervous system's off when you're yelling. I hated being yelled at. Like, absolutely, we're not yelling at our kids. Like that's a non-negotiable for me. So then you have two people who have these very, very opposing values, and it can create a lot of conflict in a relationship as you enter into parenting. So if the values are very, very different in that way, I think therapy can be a really helpful and wise choice so that you can get to the root of why you both feel the way you do. But if not, if you can find certain things you agree on, like for example, you agree, okay, we're not going to yell at our kids, but maybe like you have both a different kind of way of talking to them that works for you individually, that you're fine with, that can be kind of a negotiable, then there are a lot of parents who can work it out and create this list on their own. And it also should be like an open conversation that you keep coming back to.
Right.
And like find some wins for yourself, some things that you know you'll both agree on, just so that doesn't feel like everything on the like there's obviously things that, you know, if you're in a relationship, hopefully there are things that you agree on. You had these conversations before having kids, and like make sure you talk about those things too.
So if I'm understanding correctly, what you're saying is your piece of advice is that as parents, caregivers, we should try and get on the same page first, or set our own, like even if you're a single parent, setting your own values first and trying to make sure you're living those out is the most important.
Yes.
Before even involving your children in the creation of a set of family values.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think it's, to me, if I was a child and my parents are sitting at the table being like, let's talk about family values. Okay, so we value honesty, speaking to each other with kindness, generosity, being welcoming, whatever, right? And then I'm a kid and I'm like, what the heck? Like, you yell at me all the time. You always talk bad about everybody. You always complain every time we have to have people over. Like, you don't want to have people over in our house ever. You yell at me whenever I like don't tell you the truth right away. This does not sound like our family values. So like, these are nice words, but I don't care. Right? So like, it has to come from within. And
children perceive a lot more than
right? Like if I said to
their words can describe.
If we said to our girls, like, our family value is being welcoming, like back to that. And they were like, you hate everyone, Mom. Like, what do you mean? Like, all you ever do is like talk bad about everybody. It wouldn't be authentic, and they would see straight through it. So it has to start with modeling it and then being like, oh, there's actually a word to describe this thing that we try and do. It's called welcoming. This is like ways that we've done it, and we want to include you in this process. That's very different to me.
I think that's good.
Yeah.
It's very powerful, profound.
Oh, wow. I've never heard you say that word.
Cut that.
The P word.
Don't ever let that slip through. I think that's a good place to end it.
I think so too.
Thank you for having this conversation with me, Jessica.
You're welcome. I enjoyed it. Hey friends, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. We are glad that you are here. If you enjoyed today's episode and found it interesting, we'd really appreciate it if you'd leave a rating and a review. Scott and I actually sit down together and read them all. A 5-star rating helps us share our podcast and get these important messages out there. Thank you so much for listening, and we can't wait to talk to you again next time.